All right, Krishna, everyone. This is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at the 11th mantra of the Sri Isopanisad. Now, this is the 12th part in my series. We started with an invocation mantra. We've gone through 10 of the mantras after the invocation. So this is the 11th. If you have not watched all of the previous videos in this series, I recommend starting from the beginning. It's going to be really helpful to follow along sequentially. And I also recommend picking up an actual copy of the book that we're working through, the Sri Isopanisad by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is like my grandfather guru of my guru. In this presentation, we've been looking at a lot of different mantras and a lot of different verses, and following along with Srila Prabhupada's purports, his explanations is pretty awesome. So hopefully you'll check that out. Get it on Amazon, I believe. Anyway, okay, so let's dive back in, kind of pick up where we left off. So remember that the Sri Isopanisad comes from the Upanishadic tradition, which is the ancient philosophical commentaries on and summaries of the Vedas, some of the oldest spiritual literature in the world. The Sri Isopanisad is the Upanishad of the Lord. Isha means Lord. It was written in poetic verse. It consists of 18 verses. And today we're on the 11th. So mantra 11, and we're going to read this aloud together. If you have the book, you can follow along. If you'd like to read it out loud with me, it's nice to actually chant the mantra out loud. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Let's read it again. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. Really nice verse, really rich verse, and there's a really good purport we're going to look at next. So this comes from Srila Prabhupada from this section of the book. He says, the miseries of the material world are also indirect reminders of our incompatibility with dead matter, and intelligent living entities generally take note of these reminders and side by side engage themselves in the culture of vidya, or transcendental knowledge. So we have avidya and vidya, which, as I understand it, are both also connected to where we get something like the word video from, which also has this connotation of sight or seeing. Avidya, we're not really seeing things clearly. Vidya, we are. But it's also true that, sometimes people want to go and live in a cave, and they take the spiritual life and get away from the material energy. But this verse, let's go back to it one more time, basically tells us that that's not the best idea. Only one who can learn the process of nescience and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So Prabhupada here says that the miseries of the material world are indirect reminders of our incompatibility with dead matter. Have you ever made a really bad choice or gotten into a relationship you regretted, or a job that wasn't the best for you, or anything like that? Typically when you do, and it doesn't work out, the way that it doesn't work out, it has a way of reminding you about what you are supposed to be doing. Now, it's not to say that, we should go and, for example, sometimes people will hear something like that and they'll be like, well, I guess, I should just go and, party and, kind of like go and act out my self-destructiveness, because then, I'll learn something about, it'll sort of teach me about spiritual life. And I can't learn about spiritual life unless I go out and party or do something self-destructive. And that's not what this is saying. What it is saying is that we have to make a study of the material energy of karma. And astrology helps us do this. Ayurveda helps us do this. Being reflective about our experiences in life and understanding the nature of karma, of maya, sometimes called samsara, this web of illusory effects that we're always chasing, trying to obtain happiness through. I can go out and do all sorts of things, most of the time only to learn that those things that I did trying to obtain some form of happiness were neither lasting or really satisfying. So indirectly, those experiences are teaching me about nescience, about what is the difference between darkness and light. And so we have to be kind of students of our own experience, and that's an encouraged part of Bhakti Yoga. We learn through our failures and interactions with the material illusion, with the material energy. We have to know what spirit isn't in order to know what it is. But at the same time, we can't stop with just focusing on what isn't spirit or what isn't spiritual, because if we only focus on this idea of, sometimes the in Sanskrit you say neti neti, like not this, not that, not this, not that. Well, that's not spiritual, and that's not spiritual, and that's such an illusion, and that's such an illusion. That's not the point either. We learn through our experiences the difference between spirit and matter. We learn how to draw that line and say, this isn't what's going to serve me spiritually, or this is an illusion. But really, the proactive part is the most important, which is to say, the cultivation of vidya, or transcendental knowledge, which coincides with devotional service or devotional practice. So, in other words, our hearts always want to attach to something. My guru says that our hearts are like always searching for a Wi-Fi signal to connect with, and the signal that we're looking for is God, God within the heart, God in all things, transcendental, the transcendental Krishna, we say in Krishna Bhakti. So this personality, this actual person that we're looking to connect with, and it's really important because sometimes in spiritual life we say that like God is like just beingness or presence or white light or something like that, something disembodied and impersonal. And in Bhakti we say no, we're actually we're souls, we're beings, we go through bodies, but we can also go to a spiritual world. And in the spiritual world, each of us has an infinitely unique, perfect relationship with a living being that is the source of all things. And that being, though we can't capture, contain, or imagine it with our heads or with our language, is what we have to draw toward through proactive practices. And that's the culture of knowledge that we're talking about when we have to learn them side by side. And that's always more important, to be cultivating that proactively. We've talked about that in easy practices of surrender, through mantra meditation, through listening to sacred sound, through reading the scriptures like these. In this way, regularly practicing this, we are attaching our hearts to that transcendental personality, that transcendental being. And we discover our own being in the process, our own unique spiritual form in the process. But at the same time, our experiences in the material world are always like little indirect messages or signals directly from that divine being saying, hey, I want you to come back. I want you to engage with me. So the material world is also set up to help us, but in an indirect manner. But we have to learn those things side by side. We have to make a study of life and our experiences in order to cultivate a knowledge of transcendence. Knowing what spirit is, we can also utilize anything and everything in the world as part of our devotional service. If we are cultivating a mood and atmosphere of devotion to God in our everyday lives, and we put Krishna right at the center in Krishna Bhakti, I know that there are a number of Christians who listen to this channel as well. So you could say Jesus, if that's the personhood of God that you connect with, and others. But that putting that at the center is, when we do that, we start to see how anything and everything in life, including our failures and difficulties and so forth, can feed right back into remembrance, devotion, and love of that divine source. So I think this is one of my favorite verses because it reminds us that even our very human, karmic, sort of fallen experiences are here to indirectly guide us back to our source, along with the active practices of devotion that we take up. Here's a couple of verses that go along nicely with this, that I thought go along nicely with this. From the Bhagavad Gita: material nature consists of three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. When the eternal living entity comes in contact with nature, O mighty-armed Arjuna, he becomes conditioned by these modes. So we can also study through yoga philosophy an understanding of the modes of nature and being able to recognize when we are in one mode versus another. There's ignorance, passion, and goodness. Being able to recognize what mode we're in is a bit like being able to recognize, if you know a little bit of Ayurveda, which dosha might be dominant, and are you kind of balanced, or is one dosha like getting out of balance? So we need to study the material nature and the modes of material nature and the flow and flux of material nature, which is why I think astrology is also very helpful, because that's what astrology is. And when we know that, when we have an understanding of that, then we can come into deeper awareness of spiritual truth in light of our understanding of what the world is and what it isn't. So the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains those things very clearly. And then in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the other sacred Bhakti scripture, there are many, but this is maybe one of the biggest ones. The Srimad Bhagavatam says, one should try to keep himself satisfied in any condition of life, whether distress or happiness, which is offered by the supreme will. A person who endures in this way is able to cross over the darkness of nescience very easily. What does that mean? Well, first of all, it says that we should try to stay satisfied in any condition of life, whether we're really high or we're really low. We should try to remain satisfied within. And knowing that we should do this because any condition of life is being given to us, directed by, guided by divinity, guided by God, guided by Krishna. So one should try to keep himself satisfied in any condition of life which is offered by the supreme will. It's hard to align ourselves with that when it feels like it defies what we want or what we think we need or what we think is best. That level of surrender requires faith, and it's definitely not always easy. A person who endures in this way is able to cross over the darkness of nescience very easily. So if we are able to surrender to whatever is coming and whatever manifests and just go with it and try to stay satisfied, whatever the condition may be, the verse promises us that we very easily cross over the darkness of illusion. So that is what I have for today. I hope that this 11th mantra was interesting. And we will be back soon with the 12th mantra, which is another great one. So until then, take care. Hare Krishna.